I definitely agree. Like, the funny thing is, based on these teams at the moment, in theory, the team you should want to beat the most on paper is Fnatic, just because how well the split's gone overall. But I agree. Like, let's be real. Just because of the names of the players in G2, you know they're going to be in the playoffs no matter what. They're probably going to be a team you have to beat if you want to go to Worlds. Like, I feel like just for the like psychological aspect, if you're Mad Lions, you want to beat G2. That's a really big game no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter that on paper people don't think they're the best. They still do have the names that sort of deserve to be in that category. I also think as well, let's talk a little bit about G2 actually. It does feel as though G2 is sort of like gradually powering up. Like, I know they went through that rough part, let's say like in the middle of the split when they were losing some pretty uncharacteristic games. They definitely are out of the woods, but they look a lot better. Like, they look now, like, I'm excited to see them play the playoffs now, Zabatine. I was really worried before when it was the middle of the split. I thought they were going to get wrecked.
I feel like G2 as a team, like the game has been changing a lot this year because since Riot changed the items, because they're correlated to all the champions, they twist all the matchups. So you can't really leverage on your existing knowledge when
Right.
all the items are changing. And you have been seeing players that were leveraging a lot on their experience on stage, being outperformed. Like, I can speak about the Wunder, for instance, in terms of laning 1v1 by players that like are putting the hours, are playing 10 hours a day, every single day. So obviously the gap is slowly closing because the game is, I would say, slowly shifting back into a more normal state, and the game is more figured out that what it was like, for instance, earlier this split where like mages were like broken, like dead, and there was like bruisers everywhere on the map with like rumble jungle and stuff like this. So the game reassembles much more to what they are used to play, even though they were like known for this chaotic play everything type of play style. I still think that they can much more focus on their fundamentals, right, when they're playing, when the game is like the way it is currently, than when they were playing at the early stage of the season where playing 20 hours a day was really making a difference. You were seeing like the Adam, the VTOs, the Nuclear. Like, I mean, Nuclear was not playing like that well early in the season. He took some time to perform, but it was really that way at the I would say the early stage of the season. And so I think G2 is gonna be back on track. And if you look at the game they played against Misfits last week, Misfits didn't have a great draft for sure, but they really got exposed for that. And that's the sign of a team that's playing very well is, opponent doesn't have win condition and they played a very methodical, steady macro game and just showed all the cracks into Misfits draft, won the game. No, they didn't bat an eye about it. It was very, very normal for them to beat Misfits. So I'm pretty sure that they will have a hard time against Mad. I'm pretty sure they will have a pretty rough time against Rogue, but besides that, I'm pretty sure they can win against anyone.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask about G2, which I found interesting, is to me the most obvious difference with the team that had Perkz in, even when he was playing the mid lane as well, than the team that doesn't, is like the mid game. Obviously, it's just night and day compared to them. They used to be arguably the best team ever from the West, just adapting, always finding a way back in the game. Like, funnily enough, it's actually the team they're playing today that sort of holds up mantle of Mad Lions. Mad Lions are the team that find their way back in all the matches where they're behind. What do you think about G2 in that sense? Because obviously it's made people question, like, what's the leadership of the team like? Like, what is the shot calling like? It's one of those things I found very funny. I'm interested as a coach's perspective on this, mate, because I've noticed in teams, a beautiful thing about a team is that the best players, like their best qualities and characteristics almost become the characteristics of the whole team. But it can also mean that when you take that piece out, you think all these other players, like this guy's clutching and this guy knows what to do under pressure, but maybe they don't. Some of that's only get almost conferred, almost like it's almost like Magic the Gathering, like an aura around the fucking card when you have it in the deck. Like, that's what it feels like. You move that one piece and suddenly some of these players just look like they're not geniuses at knowing what to do on the map all the time. So what have you thought of that aspect of G2?
I personally think that losing Perkz is definitely a liability for any team because Perkz is able to play on the edge at any point in the game and build some time and space for the team to actually play. Even if he dies, the team just collapse on him. Like that's how G2 has been playing pretty much like that last 3 years. And even before Caps joined, when he was mid laner in 2018, like they were playing always around side lanes because Perkz has a very, very extremely good understanding on what needs to be done on the side wave to pressure the map. And he's always doing that. And if you look at Cloud9 today, it's very common that you feel like Perkz is hinting a little bit, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, he is hinting, but he's communicating that he's going to hint. And then he creates space and he creates field for his team to actually express themselves. this has been gone from G2's play, like, because he's not like, I don't think that any player really does that. Reckless has a very telegraphed two-dimensional playstyle, yet very effective when he can express himself, and he has like the meta for him to play the game he wants. But this space isn't created just by Jankos and Caps, and has always been like kind of the props of Perkz. And if you look, for instance, Fnatic on the other hand, Adam, when I was watching him in ERLs, like he has this thing where he's like playing like a madman at all points in the game, but he's creating so much space because people are gonna tune in on him overextending, and that creates a lot of great fights for Fnatic. And you see kind of the same pattern they like G2 would have in the past with Perkz. So I think that from now on, like they need to understand that they need to maybe be less creative, because I think that when you have a player of the caliber of Reckless, it's good to play a Reckless playstyle. But I don't think that, like as I say, if you need to change your playstyle as a team, even if it's one person changing, everybody needs to put the 10 hours a day to catch up on that, because changing a playstyle as a team, you can't just leverage on your fundamentals. And I think this gap is where you see like G2 underperforming, because they need to relearn how to play the game as a team, because one player was making the whole playstyle different like if you compare G2 last year and G2 this year. And it's just like the very essence of playing with Perkz and not playing with Perkz.
Because the funny thing to me, mate, is I know people, like, it's obviously not as simple as like minus Perkz plus whoever, and it's just that equation only. But as I say, if you look at kind of like what they don't have now that Perkz is gone, I even think as much as people are flaming Perkz, because he has looked pretty mediocre in LCS when I watch him, individually, that is. Dude, his team in Cloud9, as you're saying, they still have the same quality that he had in G2. Like, they instantly make the response to whatever's happening on the map. Now, that doesn't mean you make the right response, but people don't understand how OP it is to have someone who can decisively make that call immediately. Like, I'll give you a great explanation from Counter-Strike, actually. A friend of mine basically used to be, you might know, I don't know how much you know Counter-Strike, but he's a Serbian guy called Janko. He was basically at one point like the #1 broadcast analyst. He was kind of like what Monty was years ago in League of Legends, like the guy that everyone like trusts, that you know what you're talking about. You got all the like bigger macro understanding. And his angle when he became a coach and he worked with a bunch of players afterwards, when I asked him in an interview, basically like what qualities does a leader basically have to have? What does a quality does a shot call have to have? One of the reasons why he said he personally doesn't like in Counter-Strike when people call in a second language, for example. This is a really shrewd point to make. That's why I brought it up so many times. He said the right call, but like a second or two late, becomes the wrong call. And that is such a fucking shrewd way to explain it. Because as he's saying there, obviously the point is you can still get out what you want to say, but if you have to go through like second language, it might take a second longer, you might butcher. Well, my point is, forget the second language part. If you're just a guy in the game who might be super smart, you might be great in the reviews, you might have an idea. If you can't make that call instantly, like if it's a call for something like a base race, you're going to lose the game off it. Like, it doesn't matter that he did have the correct angle. So to me, I think people really underestimate, like, once you have a good sort of shot calling, like, I would say, like, collective headspace for the team where people kind of know what they want to do in the game and how each other want to play, that is one of the most valuable things you can have in any team, in my opinion. Like, you dismantle that very carefully if you ever do. And you definitely don't think, which is, I think, it's not like G2 chose this, but they did end up in this position. Their scenario was they thought on paper they were upgrading because they thought individually Reckless is a better ADC. But this is why the game of making teams is a lot more complicated than just picking 5 good players, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the thing is, Perkz is always proactively saying that he's gonna end, and that makes a world of difference. Because you can't say you're gonna see really a fuck ton of players that are gonna be like, "Oh guys, I'm in trouble." And he doesn't say that. He say, "Guys, I'm gonna be in trouble, so watch me." And that makes a world of difference. And he's very, very unique in that sense. And if you look at the games of G2 when they were on the back foot, especially in the series against Fnatic, like the direct shit series against Fnatic in the previous years, it was always very close. But you felt like even when Fnatic had the lead, there was always some type of random, really like out of their ass play. Like they would just go 5 men on the side, just push, and it's like, okay, just finish the game. We're gonna just base race. And then they just play with your nerve. And I think that Perkz has this kind of disrespectful play, like from a, I would say, theoretical, like academic play style point of view. But he's playing with your nerve, and he's always communicating that to your team. So building a team is definitely like, I mean, I've done that. It's a nightmare. And sometimes you feel like it's not going to work, and it works like it does wonders. Sometimes you change a player that should be an upgrade and doesn't work. Sometimes you you think it's gonna be absolutely fantastic, and no player speaks to each other. So it's very, very hard to understand for the, I would say, the mass audience, like the broad audience, because you can't say what's going on the comms, in terms of like just lifestyle, behavioral skills, like behind the stage and stuff. So obviously G2 is strong, and I think that it will be a loss and a liability for the whole European scene not to see them at Worlds. But at the same time, they have to show that they are able to play a rogue type of play style. Like if you have these players, I think that you need to be much closer to rogue, where you are going to play around the individual level of your players, instead of just trying to be that very creative, dynamic playstyle that they used to have, because it doesn't work, and not everybody's on the same page in G2 sometimes.
Yes, that's why to me you could really tell this split in particular. The last split was fine in spring; they just didn't have the style, in my opinion. The players were all fine, though. I mean, listen, it was a bit silly that fans voted all of them the best player in LEC, but they were all definitely very good players still. This split for me, dude, is what shows me that, like, individually some of them have had struggles. Because I agree, the most obvious thing you do if you don't have all these wonderful intangibles we're talking about, which, by the way, a spoiler, almost no one does. It's why Perkz is such a rare commodity and is literally being sold for millions and millions of dollars around the world. Like, if you don't have that, the obvious thing to do is, like you say, is just be like Rogue. Just be the team that has among the best players in every role. You just get the lead in every game, do a good draft, and then at that point in time, you have to be pretty fucked up to lose the game. Like, you're leading in every game. That's why Rogue feels like they can win every match in LEC. The problem is they actually appear to not be able to do what Rogue does. Like, their players actually aren't as good right now individually, as crazy as that sounds when you look at the names. Because I have to say, mate, I'll do my bet in a second for this exact Mad Lions G2 game, but I want to actually get your thoughts, because one of the few times where I could go both ways on this one, mate. Because on the one hand, G2 is way better than they were a few weeks ago, and they're obviously winning against a lot of the top teams, actually. They've had a bunch of big wins. Basically, only that Fnatic game they sort of gave up, and even then that was like an interesting game. But here's the problem, right, is G2's actually a pretty decent favourite. Their odds are 1.69, and Mad Lions is 2.17. And the problem is, as much as I'm not like a huge Mad Lions fan, like I say, they are so shrewd as a team at getting back into games. Like, they actually seem like it's one of those areas where, even though people always say, but you can't know what coaches do. Like, put it this way, I don't believe there's almost ever been a team that was really good in the mid game that had bad coaching. I don't even know how that would exist. Not least because, by the way, bad coaching would probably fuck that up for you if you were good at it. Like, if anything, they'd tell you things that'd ruin that for you. So, in my opinion, that's usually a sign of good coaching. So, part of me feels like I should actually go with the underdog, which is Mad Lions. And so, what do you think? Would you steer me one way or the other? Would you say I should pick G2 for this? What are you feeling?
I don't know. My gut feeling is going towards G2, because I feel like there is this recent patch that has been buffing Syndra, which is a very cornerstone champion for G2. I'm pretty sure it's going to be banned, but it's going to open the draft for them. And I feel like the meta, as I say, is shifting much more towards a regular playstyle that they are much more comfortable on. And there are no champions in the top lane that Wunder can play that fits the playstyle required to win for G2. So if they do so, I think they have a very decent shot, because I think that in terms of mid-game, they are the only team that will be completely able to match Mad Lions. Like, so it's just going to be about laning and fighting. Okay. But since the meta is favoring them, I feel like G2 can win this game. Like, I would not be like, I could make the bet on G2, and I would not feel like I'm a madman.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.